Previously on this channel, I have covered topics such as the real meaning behind the phrase 5 moves of doom and the beauty that is chain wrestling. However, you might notice that these topics all hover around a central theme: a wrestler's moveset, because when it comes to a wrestler's move quantity, fans and wrestlers alike don't always seem to agree on what the right amount really is. Which means that it's a perfect subject to bring up for discussion amongst the know-it-all nation, because today, Dave knows the debate over how many moves a wrestler should do. Okay, just so we're on the same page before we get started, I'm not going to be giving an exact number or anything, and I don't even know that there is one. This is just opening up the conversation, which is something that I think we as wrestling fans should be having. Because a lot of us fans, myself included, do have very strong opinions on how many moves a wrestler should do, but how many of us have ever stopped to really put thought into how a moveset gets fleshed out and why? Now, this isn't as easy as it sounds, because to be perfectly honest with you, I was going to review matches and get an exact count for specific wrestlers, but I had to stop because, as I found out, deciding what counts as a move can sometimes be a bit tricky. Well, when examining what makes a moveset, I first wanted to eliminate all strikes right off the bat, but then it didn't feel right not including moves like the drop kick or clotheslines or the roaring elbow, even though they are strikes. Furthermore, what about repeating a move? For example, if two wrestlers are telling a story and they are repeatedly reversing a headlock into another headlock, back and forth over and over again, should this all count as just one move, or can we count each headlock as its own move? And that leads me to storytelling, because there are some that would argue that a low move count can be forgiven if it's done in order to tell a story. Now, before we dive any further, let me be perfectly clear about this. I am not saying that you can't have both a high amount of moves and a great story, because you definitely can. In fact, matches that do are some of my favorites. And while I know that the internet just loves to polarize everything, I must stress that there is definitely plenty of gray area when it comes to discussing moves and its relationship to telling a story. And that gray area is exactly where this next section lives. For instance, let's just say we have a match booked to be a total squash, and the squashee does a great job of selling the moves of his opponent, and he doesn't even get the slightest amount of offense in. And through this process, he does a fantastic job of getting his opponent over, drawing sympathy from the crowd, and telling the story. Would it be fair to say that this wrestler is terrible in this match because he didn't get in a single move? Of course not. But just like the old adage goes, offense gets the glory, but defense wins the game. And when it comes to pro wrestling, while offensive maneuvers do tend to steal the show, selling your opponent's moves and telling the story are indeed game-winning components. The act of taking a move, selling a move, should probably count as part of a wrestler's repertoire. But yet, no one would ever call acting a wrestling move. Although that does remind me, what about when it's not acting? What about when the injuries are legitimate? Because another argument against doing a ton of moves that many fans tend to overlook is that every move has a cost. Remember, while it might be predetermined, wrestling still takes a toll on the body, even in some ways that your average fan doesn't necessarily notice. And the impact of being in the ring, taking bumps, throwing your body around, and just normal wear and tear that happens when it comes to wrestling really does add up over time. And so a lot of wrestlers tend to think of moves as a form of currency, if you will. They figure they can do a ton of moves with a lot of variety and big high impact spots that'll definitely get a huge pop from the crowd, but they also know that'll probably take years off their career. They also know that they could do a safe, short, and reliable moveset that's low impact but will guarantee not to bang up their bodies too much in the process. Now again, I'm not trying to say that this is an all or nothing scenario. There are many iterations in between these two extremes. It's not just choosing between doing no moves just so you can be in the ring for 50 years or doing 100 moves just so your candle can burn a brief and lovely light. As a wrestler, you have to balance which moves you can do at a low risk but with the highest possible reward. Lots of moves that build up damage over a long period of time, a few high impact moves that take a toll, simple moves that won't impress but they'll definitely keep you alive, or any combination thereof. Also, there is the concept of saving big spots only for big events. But then again, what constitutes as a big event and a big spot? Well, that varies from person to person. Finding the perfect formula and the exact right ratio of all these things is a career-long endeavor, constantly being updated to each wrestler's experience, physical body condition, and of course, age. And unfortunately, age is not a friend to many when it comes to this subject, because there are some wrestlers who, while they're young, enter enter their careers with the mentality that they're completely invincible, incorporating tons of moves and also dangerous ones into the mix. But if they only had the hindsight of a couple of years, they may realize that some of these unnecessary risks can definitely be trimmed down without compromising the entertainment value of the match. Because, as many will tell you, the trick is learning to do more with less. The more moves you do, or the bigger spots you do on a regular basis, can get the audience pretty complacent, meaning that you'll just have to up the ante in order to get the same amount of awe from the crowd. But now, while I have been doing an awful lot of defending the idea that moves should be safe, sterile, and limited, of course, there is another side to this debate too. And for me, the best example against that mentality is Brock Lesnar. He has had matches where he'll do two moves, the German suplex and the F5, and that's it. Now, some people will say that when you have a big, monstrous looking guy, simple moves can look so extremely devastating that they can get away with doing very little and nothing else. And they'll also tell you, why do more when you could get away with doing less? And while that may be true, Brock can't get away with it, in my opinion. Yes, there are guys who could do a lot with a little, but when you have someone like Brock Lesnar who does next to nothing and is hyped up so much, I find it really hard to be entertained by them. And when you have a dwindling fan base in the WWE, and it's the diehard fans who are the ones still watching, you need to deliver with a little bit more just to keep our attention. Because remember, we've already seen it all since we've been watching the whole time. Furthermore, with so many other options being readily available nowadays, there is a need to keep up and compete with other promotions, which are full of young, crazy wrestlers who are shortening their careers with dangerous moves, and plenty of them. In the end, for me, I'm not trying to say that the WWE needs to become a high-risk move factory, but I am saying that they need to be aware of the rising and changing taste of your average wrestling fan. But I'm also saying that many wrestlers and wrestling fans need to know that there is a serious amount of risk and long-term consequences from doing too many moves and doing too many high-impact ones. And it can affect not just their own bodies, but it can also push expectations that impact other wrestlers and wrestling as a whole. Ultimately, I'm just saying that while I do want to be entertained, I also do know that my entertainment does have a price, and I really do appreciate all the thought and sacrifice that goes into figuring out the delicate balance that is a wrestler's moveset. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on wrestlers' movesets? Let me know down in the comments. And I also want to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters who help make this channel possible, such as Richard Lee, The Woos, and Jesus Farrow. Thank you guys so much for the support, and if you want to help keep this channel going too, then go over to my Patreon page. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.